OK. Now, the red warning lights are flashing on the global economy, according to the Prime Minister David Cameron. Great, you may say, yet more good news. We still have an enormous hole to fill in our public finances. One option is more cuts, another is more taxes. A levy on mansions in return for more cash for the NHS is one of Labour's big ideas. Not everyone in the party loves it. So is it the right way to go?
Who do we ask to give a bit extra?
The rich are going to have to pay more.
The richest must pay their fair share.
The rich should pay more.
We will use the proceeds of a mansion tax.
Worth over £2 million.
We don't want a mansion tax, do we?
We do.
I'm not keen on a mansion tax. I'm not keen on just whacking a tax on people who happen to have a property. They may have lived in it for years. It hits the elderly.
They finally do come up with an idea, and it's brilliant. But it's the mansion tax. We came up with it first.
An uplifting political moment. We came up with it first. Alison, whoever came up with it first, is it the right idea?
No, I think it's a complete... just won't get off the ground. I mean, I was looking up, everyone will know, of course, 1696, they introduced the windows tax in Britain. What did people do? They immediately bricked up as many windows as they could to avoid paying. I rather like the idea of all these people living in, well, mansions. Ed lives in a house that's very expensive. Anyone who lives in London lives in a house that's very expensive. I love the idea that instead of having, talking up your property's value, suddenly, instead of having the lovely smells that Phil and Kirsty tell us on location, must have the kitchen smelling of bread and lovely, no clutter. So everyone will suddenly be having all the clutter and just kind of leaving all the kids' toys and saying, nah, it's not worth £2 million. It's worth £1,900,000. I just don't think you're going to have to appraise the value of all these properties. They're going to be hordes of appeals. It's going to be bogged down in admin. Dennis Healey, once the Labour Chancellor of Exchequer, said, in opposition, the golden rule is never promise to introduce a tax that you have no idea how it's going to work. Mr. Miliband.
Myleene, are you filling your home with things that don't smell good in the hope of reducing
No coffee will be brewed in my kitchen. For me, I think what is so disturbing is the name in its own right, mansion. So immediately you sort of conjure up in your head sort of these Barbie-esque houses, something like Blake Carrington or Crystal Carrington would live in. But in London, which is where 80% of the people who are going to be paying this tax actually live, in the southeast of England, have you seen what that amount of money can get you? Often it's like a garage. And also, when you do look at the people who are going to be suffering this tax, it's true. A lot of them are grannies who've had these houses in their families for a long, long time. And I love the idea. Yeah, it sounds like a very sexy tax that you say, let's take from the rich and give it to the poor. But no one's actually looking at why this was instigated in the first place. If people were looking at what is going on with the NHS, my mum was a nurse in the NHS for years. I grew up around NHS nurses. It's very, very rare to actually be able to tell who's using and who's abusing, because no one really necessarily looks into it. They just think, OK, it needs more money, let's take it from the rich, because that sounds like that's going to get us more votes in the interim. But later on, as fiscal drag kicks in, we're all going to be downplaying. Yes, we are, Ed. You can't shake your head, because it's just how it is at the moment. The way that house prices are working in London, the people that are the super, super rich who are buying their houses for 140 million, this is not going to necessarily affect them because they've got their tax rebates and they're amazing accountants. It's going to be the little grannies that have lived in those houses for years and years, and it's very, very kind of you guys to turn around and say, well, don't worry if you can't pay the tax now, we'll take it when you die, and the inheritance tax as well. It's going to be their sons and daughters who are then lumbered with this.
I mean, look, I totally
don't agree with it, really.
I think I get that impression. I understand that people don't like paying more in tax, but you said there was a window tax, Alison. Actually, there's something called the bedroom tax.
Well, that didn't work either.
On the poorest people in our society.
My nan lived in a council tax,
I understand, Myleene, but let me just say, the values of my government are going to
Everyone says that,
I do think,
how?
well, how? I'll tell you how. I do think that the richest people in our society, we're talking about 100,000 homes, the top,
But it's not
the top, let me just finish.
Let's hear the
Let me
answer
just
now.
finish.
Yeah.
The top 0.5% of homes, we're going to uprate it in line with the rise in house prices for the homes above £2 million, so more people won't be dragged in. If you're somebody who's earning less than about £40,000, you'll be able to defer the payment until you sell the home.
Die.
Till you sell the home. But look, I'm going to have to
you
make
don't want
really
to sell your
difficult
home.
decisions.
Yeah.
I understand you don't like it, but I'm going to have to make really difficult decisions about how we're going to fund our NHS, how we're going to make our society a fairer society, and I absolutely defend the...
Ed, how much are you actually going to make from this? Because you don't have a definitive number.
£1.2 billion.
Really? Because
Yes.
at the moment, some people are saying that there are 58,000 of these houses, 2 million and more, and some are saying there's 100,000. Some are saying you'll make £300,000 for the NHS, and some are saying you'll make £1.2 billion.
Okay.
That's a huge extremity.
Myleene, I just want to bring it on to a more philosophical point here, because of course, you know, this is an issue which separates.
I'm the only person here as a pensioner on this panel.
Are you? I'd never have noticed.
You're going to screw me royally if you...
I think you should pay more in tax, Christopher.
No, well, hold
I
on
think
a
you
second.
should pay more in tax. I think...
No,
but
you've had
you-
your say. I'm going to have my say now.
yeah.
1% of the population of this country, 1% of the richest in this country pay 28% of the tax burden. So already the rich, whether you like rich people or not, are contributing
Overtaxed. You think they're
a
overtaxed?
significant amount. You've got to keep quiet for a minute and let me speak. This is a democracy, for Christ's sake. And now you put me off my stroke. If you are a pensioner...
Yeah.
And you're going to be whacked to 1% of the value of your house, and you are living in London. £2 million captures semi-detached houses.
Can
It
I just say
catches
that?
small.
How much
No, you
are people
can't.
gonna
It
pay?
catches
Yeah.
small
Yeah.
flats.
For 1 second.
I live in an end of terrace
Yeah.
house. I am asset reasonably rich, and I do not earn a great deal of money. You bring that in at 1%, and I will not be able to live off my pension. And that is a gross violation of the European Convention on Human Rights. Protocol 1, Article 1.
Right.
Please read.
Okay,
I look forward to the lawsuit.
Yeah. Okay, hold on a second. I'm gonna, Ed's getting a bit isolated here, and this is one of those difficult moments.
No, but maybe he's going
there
to
are
be isolated
people who might
because
be paying.
No one thinks it's going to
but
work.
it's a difficult moment, because this is one of those things where, you know, you do get, perhaps one might say, London against the country for a bit. And, you know, the truth is, Christopher, just to bring it to you for a minute, is that, you know, a lot of people watching this show will be living, you know, in places where house prices don't cost anything, and they'll be earning £26,000 or whatever it is a year. And you see this enormous wealth in London, and you think, well, yeah, they've got a lot of wealth.
How much people are paying? Because the one thing Christopher said, which is not correct, we've said, Ed Balls has set out, there's £250 a month, which is approximately the same again as the council tax, the highest council tax band for someone in the £2 to £3 million category. So it's not true the way you portrayed it, and we've been very clear that if you're on an income, as I said, explained, you can defer the charge. But look, I say bring on this debate. Bring on this debate about how we're going to change our country. I've just got to level with this audience.
Okay,
let me just finish, Myleene.
1 second, Myleene.
Let me just finish.
In the north, though, it is going to eventually affect you. It's very, again, it's like we said, the sexy way of selling it, of saying, well, London, you pay for it, the rich people, you pay for it, Robin Hood, you sort it out. But eventually, it's going to filter down whether you like it or
we're
not.
established there's not a huge fan base on this panel for the mansion tax. But I just want to move it on to a more philosophical point. Leaving aside whether the mansion tax... I sometimes get the impression that you passionately believe that one of the biggest problems is this massive wealth inequality in society. And what I'm interested to know is that some of your tax plans seem to be about sorting out the immediate problem of the deficit. But some of it seems to be about a genuine philosophical belief that the rich must pay more and you've got to find ways to do it. And we all accept that's hard because they move income around.
Well, look, I think it's a principled view that those with the broadest shoulders should bear the biggest burden. And I think that is a decent, right principle. And that is not happening under this government. They've cut taxes for the richest people in our society. When you've got people going to food banks, you've got people on middle incomes who've seen their taxes rise. Now, I just say that's not fair. And I say when the NHS is crying out for resources, we've got to make it more efficient. But let's be frank about this. We've got to face the fact that the NHS is going backwards under this government, and it can't survive with just the kind of resources that it has. Therefore, I think it's right
to save the NHS. Is that your only option? You might as well just tax them on this glass of water. You can't just point at things and tax them. You need to have a better strategy and say, look, you know, why is the NHS in this mess in the first place? Who's handling that? Who's managing that?
Okay, Myleene, okay, that's enough on that. I just want to bring over to Alison here. Is Ed not right on the notion that this government has got its tax priorities wrong? Is there not something in that? that needs to be redressed, and maybe the mansion tax is the right way to do it?
I think at the other end of the scale to what Ed's talking about, I've got friends who are struggling but are in work, and one friend she said to me the other day that she would be better off to kick her husband out and to go on benefits, and that literally there are incentives in our system, false incentives in our system, which actually penalise people of very modest income. So you should be doing something about that as well. And the other thing is you should be reallocating the council tax bands. The most expensive house in England in Grosvenor Square, £250 million. The guy who owns that pays £3,700.
But that's exactly what this is going to do, Alison. That's exactly. Now you're the supporter of the mansion tax. That's exactly what it's going to do.
I'll tell you what. I bet the vote in Grosvenor Square is the supporter of the mansion. Okay. Well, yes. Alison may not quite see it that way, but who knows? You know, at the end of the show, I just got to ask you while you're here the inevitable question. It's one of those weird kind of periods where you could argue that all party leaders have leadership woes, quotes. You've had not a great 2 weeks. I just want to ask you a serious question. Forget the politics for a moment. Are there not moments where, you know, this is a difficult time to be a political leader? Are there not moments where you go home and think, oh, this is just too depressing?
Definitely not. Honestly, it's a huge privilege doing this job. It's a huge...
You come out, you get beaten up, sometimes by people in your party, sometimes by the media.
But that's part of the test. That's part of the test, is to be resilient and to show... And look, the things I've been going through are not half the things that people working day in, day out, in jobs where they're working all the hours God sends are going through. And the difference that I have... The thing I've got an opportunity to do is to make a difference to people, and that's why I'm in it.
But do you really... Is that how you really feel when you go home on a Saturday night?
Absolutely it is, yeah.
OK, well, there you have it. Now,
Tom,
yes.
This reminds me so much of the age of John Major when I was his press secretary for 2 years.
I won't take that as a compliment.
I won't, no.
Well, he was Prime Minister quite a long time, to be fair.
If you manage to do it that long, you'll see. But I mean, I would go and see him early in the morning before seeing the lobby journalists, you know, the people who come into Downing Street every morning when Parliament is sitting. And he would be raging and fulminating and things flying around the place and be full of depression. And I had to go down to the lobby. And they would say, how is the Prime Minister's mood today? And I would have to respond, just as you have just responded now, and say, he's wonderful, he's ebullient.
I don't read the papers, though. I don't read the papers, that's the secret.
Well, nor did he, up to a point. And he would say, and I would say, wonderful, you know, up for it, give him more of this stuff.
Yes, well...
And I just get a sound of that in the way in which Ed replied.
No, to be fair, I don't... Well, you've spent quite a lot of time fighting the newspapers. I mean, you know, we know that you're into fighting from the video, but...
the newspapers...
It comes with the territory of leader of the opposition.
OK, but one final...
read the newspapers.
I don't actually read them very much.
One final question. The points at which you have gained the most traction is when you've been bold, one might say. You
say what you believe. Look, I think that's what people want in politics.
But would you like to do it more? Do you think you're doing it enough?
as much as I can, but I will keep doing it.
The newspapers don't invent the opinion polls. We may invent other things, but we don't invent the opinion polls, I'm afraid.
That is true. Now, after the break, we'll be discussing the new Band-Aid single. But first, the day David Miliband was harangued into doing a walk and talk interview.
I think today's about Ed, not about me.
Find out what happened next in just a few minutes.